John Dickey is a world-renowned historian and expert on the Sicilian Mafia. He's a professor of Italian studies at UCL and the author of multiple books on the Mafia, including Cosa Nostra, hailed in Italy as the best book ever written on the Mafia. In collaboration with 2K, we've invited him to break down Mafia the Old Country to find out how the game compares to the real-world historical period that inspired the next entry in the Mafia series. Set in 1905, Mafia the Old Country features a unique story inspired by the earliest years of the modern Mafia, and includes an array of historically inspired settings, characters, and missions. But what will an expert on the history of the Mafia think about Mafia the Old Country?
The look's great. I mean, it's like, when I see those outdoor scenes, it looks like some of the sort of flatter coastal areas around Palermo, where that really is the cradle of the Mafia. You've always got the sort of mountains in the background, but this flatter coastal plain, that's really where the Mafia emerged. You have this area of land, a sort of plain around Palermo, surrounded by mountains. It's called the Concador, or the Golden Bowl, where you would have these farmsteads, and you would also have the houses of, the wealthy aristocracy. And this was highly valuable agricultural land where they're growing lemons, vines, other fruit, but really the real economic driver is lemons here. And the look seems exactly right to me for that part of the world. I mean, it looks stunning. You can really tell they've done their homework, they've done the hard yards on the look of the place. Oh, sulfur mine scene. No, the Mafia of the sulfur mines was a thing. It was a real hotbed of Mafia activity. It's one of the key industries in Sicily, and it was a brutal industry. These mines, they're super, everybody exploiting everybody else in it, at each layer of it. From the guys who were like little bosses who hacked the pickmen, they called them, who hacked the rock out from underground, to these, they were often actually children who were used to carry the rock up to the surface. That South Country was thoroughly Mafia. You can see the research that's gone into the look of this, because there's a Sicilian artist called Onofrio Tomaselli who did a famous picture called I Carusi, which just means the lads, of these, basically the child labour that was used in the sulphur mines at around this time. They were the poor ones who'd have to kind of go down underground, fill sacks with these sulphur-bearing rocks, and carry them up. And they dump the rock in these sort of like furnaces where it would be sort of burnt to reduce it down to the liquid sulphur. And the stink in the air, poison the air, is incredibly unhealthy. An absolutely kind of hellish scene in these sulphur mines. The darkened room, the men in a circle.
Come forward.
It's going to be an initiation. Now, we know that the Mafia were using the same one they use today, initiation ritual in this period. We know about it because the first mention of it is in a police report in 1876, so already 30 years before this game is set. You've got the dagger on the table. It might often be crossed with a pistol as well. And you're presented by your godfather, your kind of sponsor to the boss, who teaches you the rules. Yeah, I mean, there were local variants, so they kind of riff a bit on how serious an undertaking this is, that, you only come out through death. Always going for the cut on the lip. Some local variants, they did do a cut on the lip. I know that in Corleone, which is a town that's about 50 kilometers from Palermo, they did use the cut on the lip. Usually it's the trigger finger. You prick the trigger finger, and then you drip some of the blood onto the sacred image. That's the Madonna of the Annunciation, which is the Mafia's patron, and they always use that. Burn it in the hand, and now the oath.
I swear my loyalty to this family.
Goosebumps, they're doing it very well. It's very good. The candlelit thing, they try and make it as spooky as they can and as serious as they can. This is a life-changing moment. When you talk to mafiosi about the moment of their initiation, it's a rite of passage that takes you from being one kind of human being into being something completely different. You're elevated to a whole new form of existence with a whole new sense of who you are and what your priorities are. You get a new identity, basically, and that's a very, very powerful experience. They've done it since the beginning, and they still do it today. And the reason is that it works. It generates loyalty. It generates a sense of awe and authority, vis-a-vis the boss. So yeah, no, it's very important. He uses the word family in that, and that's absolutely right. That's what they referred to it as. But the thing that people tend to get wrong, because the Godfather movie famously gets it wrong, is that they assume by family the mafia means uncles and fathers and sons and brothers and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't. Family is just a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the tight relationship between these blood brothers. When you go through the ritual, you become a blood brother of the other members. And in fact, the Sicilian mafia has had rules for a long time. They were certainly in force in this period that stopped more than two brothers joining the same mafia family, the same cell of the organization, because they didn't want any particular bloodline taking over the organization. They wanted to keep it as an organization rather than as the expression of a family dynasty.
Who are you?
Sono Enzo. I work here.
So it looks like he starts his career as a sulfur miner. In that sense, the bottom of the heap. And I think that's quite a plausible way for a mafioso career in this period to actually begin, for him to kind of work his way up the hierarchy in this, heavily mafia-infested sulfur business. And you could quite quickly, I think, become somebody who was controlling a segment of that business. Particularly once you're initiated, then you're in on the cartel, and then your mafia career can make its way up. There's two routes into the mafia. One, you can be born into it. You can be the son of the boss. Although you've still got to prove yourself. It's not by no means automatic at all that as the son of the boss, you will be the one who gets initiated. So there's that born into it route, but there's also the route up for the bottom, because the mafia is always looking for criminal talent to recruit and promote, because the stronger and smarter your family is, the better it is against its sort of rivals, stroke partners in neighbouring families. That image, that speaks volumes. The lemon business is crucial to the early mafia. That's where they learned to practice their extortion rackets and stuff. When the mafia is first born, so we're talking about 40 years before this game is set, Sicily had virtually a natural monopoly of lemons internationally. They were a hugely important cash crop. They were industrial uses, citric acid. So it's a very important crop. And it made the land around the Sicilian capital, Palermo, where the lemons grew, into some of the most valuable agricultural land in Europe. Now, lemons are they're very valuable crop in this period. They're very high investment. You've got to dig irrigation channels, build high walls to protect them from the wind and from thieves. And it takes about 8 years after planting for the trees to start to really make you money. And during those 8 years particularly, they're really vulnerable to vandalism. And this is the pinch point where the original Sicilian mafia gets its control over the citrus fruit industry. That's a nice lemon grove you've got there. You wouldn't want anything nasty to happen to it, would you? If you're the capo, you're going to be going round in a carriage, a pony and trap, something like that. Obviously, you know, there's this, the roads are terrible, the railways are terrible in this period. And, you know, to get anywhere in the interior, you've got to go on horseback. You know, that's goes without saying. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of horseback action. You know, no wonder that some of the very earliest mafia movies in Italy after the Second World War tried to kind of borrow the style of westerns, you know, so you'd have a lot of people being shot in the back in gulches and drinking fingers of red eye and stuff. But the bits of Sicily do lend themselves to that western kind of look. Gameplay, knife fight, obviously that's essential. And there's a kind of basis for it in the way the mafia would work in prison, when they were in prison, which was, you know, the prison system was the kind of university of crime. It was the place where a lot of initiations went on, a lot of training. One of the things they did was to have these mock knife fights. You know, you might get a spoon or a piece of wood with some chalk on it to mark the hits or whatever, kind of dueling. But actually in the outside world, as a mafioso, if you can possibly avoid it, you're never going to give anybody that kind of equal toe-to-toe chance. You know, you're going to ambush them. You're going to draw them into a trap. Come and have dinner. We're having a barbecue out in the open, and then you suddenly find yourself surrounded by 6 guys with a garrote. That's more the pattern.
My friends, my family, my beautiful daughter.
Uh-oh. I hope he's not sleeping with the boss's daughter. That is instant death sentence. One of the things you swear when you enter the mafia is that you're not allowed to look at the women of other mafiosi. You just don't go there because it instantly creates ructions, conflict. Not that it doesn't happen, of course, but the stakes are very, very high. Yeah, the thing about mafia women is that they were pawns on the chessboard of dynastic marriage. It's what in Italian they call the matrimoni incrociati, crossed marriages. What you'd do is the boss would marry his daughter to the son of another boss to make an alliance or to make peace after war, and therefore hopefully to project his power and his money down through the generations. And they've been doing that right from the beginning. So the idea that the boss's daughter might kind of be married off to a young, aspiring man of honor within the family, it's possible. But again, it probably means he's marked out for great things. But of course, you know, top narrative drama if you've got your hero who's absolutely playing with fire by flirting with the boss's daughter. So he's got money in his mouth. That's a classic message. I mean, very often when the mafia kills people, it just makes them disappear. There's no, you know, you bury them in a cleft in the rocks or whatever and they vanish. But just occasionally when these tend to be murders that are signals to another clan, to another family, to warn them off. You know, they're intimidatory messages. And the money in the mouth is obviously a metaphor for greed, that somebody's been taking too much money, been too greedy. Because the mafia love to believe that they're doing what they're doing in the name of a kind of moral code almost. They somehow manage to believe that, you know, they're behaving correctly. And, you know, that greed says, look, he broke the rules, therefore we're in the right in killing him. Oh, I love the procession. I mean, that looks amazing and just right, because Catholicism in Sicily and in parts of the south has a very kind of local, it feels quite pagan because it's based around the cult of a local saint, and the local saint's day, the big parade with the statue being walked through the streets and people will pin money to it and throw confetti and so on, and it's the big day where you celebrate your status as a believer, but also your sense of belonging to the town. And the mafia always made a point of sort of trying to make itself recognized as just one of the sources of authority in the town, almost legitimate. And you would get the mafia boss at the head of the parade, next to the priest, next to the mayor, as if they were just, you know, an authority, you know, without actually explicitly saying we're the mafia, because of course it's a secret society and they can't say, but making themselves showing themselves in important, prestigious moments of collective life to reinforce their authority in the sense they were almost legitimate. You know, that was the claim they were making.
His family. Loyalty is everything.
We do not always get to choose what we do.
We can choose who we are.
The boss there, talking about loyalty, is giving him a lesson, of course, in omertà. Omertà, the classic mafia word. We tend to assume it means the code of silence. And that is true, it is used in that way, but the origin of the word, and you see it in some mafia documents, like trial papers and stuff for this period, where it's used, it's actually from the Sicilian dialect, from umirtà, which means humility. Humility as a sort of form, humility before the boss, obedience to the boss. The boss's authority is everything. And that originally what omertà meant, this sense of humility. They're so rich, those photographs. So it's really good to see that they've drawn on these historical sources from the period. You can really feel that working itself through the look of the game. No, you can tell they've invested a lot of time and effort and talked to people who, you know, on the ground, who really know the place and know the feel of the place to communicate a really powerful, authentic idea of Sicily. It feels like it's not just been translated out of a movie, but it feels like it comes out of real exploratory visits to Sicily and looking and copying the feel of, you know, the real thing. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I don't know much about the original knives, but, you know, that's the route I'd take if I were gonna be as authentic as possible. Sicily, you still get these amazing craftsmen and stuff, traditional craftsmen doing this kind of thing.
Don Torrisi looks out for people around here. Sometimes the client is feeling less than cooperative and we need to,
teach them a lesson.
remind them of their obligations.
I've been extremely impressed by the look and the authenticity of it. They've gone into absolutely granular detail to create a sense of the different environments in which the Sicilian mafia moved in this period. From these sort of agricultural estates out in the Palermo hinterland to sulfur country, to the city, you know, the center of political power and wealth. And it just feels, very, very like Sicily was at this time. So at that level, it's very impressive. The one thing is, obviously, they've no budget limits. They've brought a whole volcano over from eastern Sicily to western Sicily, where the mafia is based. But I'll let them get away with that.
And who are you, Enzo?
You can adventure through Mafia the Old Country yourself by pre-ordering the game, where you'll unlock the exclusive Soldato Pack. Mafia the Old Country releases on the 8th of August on PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S.